The thing that I found the most interesting in your discussion with Professor Sky and, you know, your back and forth between videos was in when you guys were talking about the fallout of Drake's career. So like, what's he going to do going forward? And I think it was you who said, like, maybe he's going to go back to what made us like him in the first place, you know, being relatable, being self-aware. And it like hit me, number one, like, shit, yeah, that's why we liked him in the first place. And, you know, two, nobody, like, you guys were the first people to even bring that up. And this was after like weeks and weeks after analyses. I'm actually like starting to put together my first ever video essay about it. And I've been, you know, going through old songs. I watched that Better Than Good Enough documentary from 2010 and just watching the transformation of, you know, Drake the everyman to Drake the whatever he is now. It's like, it was such a slow burn that nobody noticed it was happening.
Well, I think it's a sign of how long he's been here. You know, yeah. I mean, just the idea that Kendrick came out in 2009. Mm-hmm. J. Cole came out in 2000. These guys have been around for a long time. We're not used to rappers staying on top for that long. I mean, a lot of rappers from the 90s almost seem like they took pride in retiring. These guys aren't even talking about that, you know? And I attribute that to Kanye West in a lot of ways. You know, Kanye, as soon as Kanye said, never leave while you're hot, that's how Mace screwed up. You know, I think a lot of people internalize that because Kanye hasn't gone away either. You know,
yeah, like, he wasn't wrong.
Right. Jay-Z was dropping every year. You know, he's probably the first one of that era to, like, before Lil Wayne, Jay dropping every year was one of the biggest things ever. It's like, he kind of made himself, he put himself in that spot because he never gave you a year without some new hope. You know, and, you know, I think with Drake, I've had some conversations with different analysts in my audience about how, when was that tipping point for Drake? Like, when did he start getting far away from who he was? I think it was after that Meek Mill battle. I think after he beat Meek Mill, his ego level went do. And he almost got to a point where you couldn't tell him anything, right? And not to say that he should listen to anybody. He's Drake. He's world-class. He's, you know, immensely successful. He's the first international artist ever to break hip-hop in America. You know, he is a trailblazer by every sense of the word. Every sense of the word, excuse me. But I think that let him feel like he was more culture than he really was, right? Because after that, you get a bunch of team up projects. After that is when he really starts jumping around to every style every time it shows up. There's examples of it prior to that, but it almost seemed like he was getting lost in his own sauce after that. And for me, just the quality of conversations that would come out of his projects, it became glaringly apparent how narrow they were.
I think it was a combination of his winning the Meek Mill battle by a landslide when not a lot of people expected him to, and his ego blowing up, on top of him just kind of running out of things to talk about. Like, so, like, I think we've talked about this before, like the narrative in a lot of rappers' careers, like their first project is the come up, the life story. The second major project is the I'm famous now, I'm adjusting the things, here's how my life has changed since project number one. And then, like, what was the one that came out after Take Care?
Nothing Was the Same.
Nothing Was the Same.
That's his More Money, More Problems.
It seemed like an extension of Take Care. There were some, like, undisputable highlights, like some classic tracks on there. But I also noticed he became less specific in his storytelling. And it was the first project where I was like, oh, this song's fucking filler. Okay, he's not really saying much on here. And by the time Views came out, and there was like, if you're reading this in between that, it was just like, oh, he's bored. And he's just kind of going through the motions. And no, here's another song about how hard he works and how the FBI's watching him. Okay, cool. Whereas before that, we got tracks like "You and the Six" and "Fear" and the Resistance and "Look What You've Done," where he knew who he was, he knew who he wasn't, he was okay with that, and I think that's why a lot of people fucked with him, because he like brought out this whole other moodier, more emotionally resonant side of that genre of music. And I think at some point he also forgot why people fucked with him.
Well, also the cosigns. I mean, that is the other thing that I don't think people need to forget. It's disingenuous to say that Drake made it without help and he's only been giving people his stimulus package. That's so disingenuous. I mean, when Drake came out, I don't know how big this discussion was, but I know that all of us in Brooklyn in our scene and all the journalists I was around and all the artists I was around, we used to talk all the time about whether or not Drake should have signed to Cash Money at all or anybody. Here is a guy here's Canadian Zach Morris, and he is a dope ass rapper. And this is an independent era, and the entire music industry is cratered at that point, and streaming isn't even a thing yet.
No, it's torrent season.
Direct sales is working great for a lot of people. Bandcamp is functioning, it's out there. You start seeing independent success stories around. Why even sign? Yeah, you sign because you need a cosign. You need to be under the umbrella. You need to get your cool points up. You need to build relationships. That's why people do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so that is how we even got a chance to hear him on a broad scale, because we heard him next to Wayne. We heard him next to Ross. We heard him next to Hov. We heard him next to M. We heard him next to Kanye. That was critical in getting us cool with that sound. That was huge. You know, like whether or not, if there's a thing in the music industry, it's called the fuck you deal, right? Everybody needs to take a fuck you deal to get to the next checkpoint, right? Because you need someone out there advocating for you. You need someone who's opening doors for you. You need these things. That's why you can have someone who has as big of an audience as Tom McDonald, but Tom McDonald ain't gonna chart. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, you just need stuff like that. You can be Nav all day, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be cool. Doesn't mean that culture is going to rock with you. No disrespect to any of these guys, by the way. I mean, all disrespect to Tom McDonald, but no disrespect.
Yeah, fuck that dude.
But like, you know, it's like Eminem and Dre, right? M needed Dre in a major way. If you put M anywhere else, he'll be a dope rapper. He's not going to be superstar out of here because he's not going to have that same connection. And, you know, I think M would have done way better than Drake, you know, on his own independently, simply because Eminem is American. That's a huge thing. I mean, just
that is a plus.
There's no international rappers who, I mean, what do you got? You got 21 Savage, fucking Slick Rick, I guess.
We didn't know 21 was British until he got deported.
Right, exactly. So it's a very difficult thing. There's a lot of fantastic MCs all across the world, but breaking this market even non-rap, this is a difficult market to break. You know, when the Beatles got here, that was a big deal. You know, when the Beatles broke America, that was huge. I don't know if there had been another band from UK that had broken America in that same regard. I could be wrong. I'm not a historian of rock. But so, you know,
Ed Sullivan.
I'm not saying that Drake did everything. I'm not saying he wouldn't have been anything by himself, but those cosigns catapulted him, which is why everyone got together and pulled that culture card. That is what happened, right? Because the same thing happened with Eminem and D12, right? Even behind the scenes. There was a lot of, at different points in time, you know, how about this? I assume, you know, allegedly, whatever terms, but at different points in time, you know those guys are, you know, felt like they had to have discussions about getting paid more at different points in time. When Eminem stopped doing D12 albums, you know that affected everybody's money, right? And everyone's like, oh, Eminem just built those guys up. No, being around those guys, his entire come up in life helped him tremendously. Everybody saw 8 Mile. He needed, what's the guy's name? Future, what was his name?
Proof.
No, right, I know Proof in real
The guy
life.
Proof is based on Mekhi Phifer for all.
Yeah,
intents.
Mekhi Phifer. Like that was his, his yo, guys, he's with me. He's cool. Like people need that. There's a YouTube channel called What the Dirt. They really pretty much talk about rap beef all the time, and they break it down fantastically. Dude breaks it down.
Oh, he's great.
He did one on Kid Rock. He had the dude that Kid Rock leached off of to get accepted in his video. Like you need that kind of stuff if you're from outside of a culture, or you need that kind of stuff you need a fuck you deal to get into certain industries, certain spaces, or I could have been doing YouTube videos on my own, I guess, but I needed to be at DX to even get the immediate opportunity to share my ideas with a big audience fast. These aren't things that are a knock. These are things that are just part of how things go. And so whatever happened, at some point in time, everyone looked up and said, okay, this dude's been around too long, man. Look, he did that to you? He did that to you too? Wait, you too? We've been had 20 XXX and all these young people talk about. I think maybe that's when it changed. Like the younger artists were the ones that were like, I actually don't want to work with Drake. I know he's going to take my song and I'll never blow up. You know what I mean? So,
The Weeknd tried to warn everybody.